"Give me the receipt," Dominic Vale said, and the whole restaurant seemed to forget how to breathe. Maribel Hayes stood in the middle of the casino dining room with red wine bleeding down her white apron, a silver tray pressed against her stomach, and a crumpled receipt hidden beneath her thumb. Vivian Cross had just fired her for being wrong for the front room. But Dominic was not looking at Maribel's body. He was looking at the paper she had been told to throw away. 3 hours earlier, Maribel had tied that same apron in the employee bathroom with both hands shaking from hunger and exhaustion. The mirror above the sink had a crack running through the corner, splitting her reflection in two. One version of her face under the harsh fluorescent light, tired but steady. The other warped by the glass, wider, softer, easier for people to dismiss. She smoothed the fabric over her hips, then reached into her locker for her old phone. The screen was spiderwebbed from the night it had fallen on the bus, but the camera still worked if she pressed the corner hard enough. She checked the folder of receipt photos before her shift, the way some people checked prayers. 26 images. 26 nights where tips had vanished, tables had changed, or charges had appeared after she clocked out. She had not shown anyone yet. Not because she was weak. Because she knew the difference between truth and proof, and in a place like Vale House, truth without proof could get a waitress escorted through the back door with her last paycheck folded like pity. By 7:30, the restaurant was glowing the way expensive rooms always glowed, as if money itself had been melted into the chandeliers. Men in dark suits murmured over bourbon. Women in silk touched their pearls when Maribel passed, not because she had done anything wrong, but because her body made them aware of every cruel little rule they had mistaken for elegance. Vivian Cross moved through the room like a blade wrapped in velvet. Her cream suit never wrinkled. Her voice never rose. "Maribel," she said near the service station, smiling as if offering kindness. "Remember, slow movements tonight. We don't want guests." Feeling crowded, Maribel looked at the dining room, then at the narrow path between tables. "I know the floor." Vivian's smile thinned. "Of course you do. You've been useful here for years." Useful. Not valued. Not trusted. Useful. Maribel picked up table 12's bill at 8:49. The receipt was still warm from the printer. That was the first thing she noticed. The second was the tip line, dragged through with black ink before the guest had even signed. The third was worse, a truffle risotto charged to the table, though the chef had cursed half an hour earlier that the last truffle was gone. She folded the receipt once and slid it beneath her tray. A small thing. A paper thing. But her mother's medicine had gone unpaid twice because of small paper things. She had taken 3 steps when a wine glass tipped from table 12 and shattered against the floor. Red wine splashed her apron. A woman gasped. A man laughed under his breath. Vivian arrived before the glass stopped spinning. She did not ask if Maribel was cut. She reached for the name tag on Maribel's chest and unclipped it in front of everyone. "I'm sorry," Vivian said softly, making sure the front tables could hear. "This simply confirms what we discussed. The front room requires a cleaner silhouette." Silence spread through the restaurant, polished and cruel. Maribel did not cry. She kept both hands on the tray, even when everyone could see it trembling. At the back booth, Dominic Vale lifted his eyes. His gaze moved from Vivian's fingers to the missing name tag to the red stain on the apron. Then it stopped on the corner of the receipt beneath Maribel's thumb. "Bring that to me," he said. Vivian's face did not change, but her hand closed too quickly around the void stamp. And Maribel saw, printed at the bottom of the receipt in pale gray ink, a complaint time of 8:41 for a table that had not sat down until 8:46. The complaint time sat at the bottom of the receipt like a dead insect trapped under glass. 8:41. Maribel felt the number before she understood it, a small cold pressure behind her ribs. Table 12 had not been there at 8:41. At 8:41 she had been in the service hallway, wringing out a damp towel over the utility sink while the dishwasher thundered behind her and the neon from the casino sign bled red across the wet tile. At 8:41, Vivian Cross had walked past wearing her pale coat and the sharp perfume that always arrived 3 seconds before she did. At 8:41, Maribel remembered because her old phone had buzzed in her apron pocket with a bank alert. Card declined. Mercy General Pharmacy, $86.17. Her mother's heart pills. She had stared at the message for 1 second too long, then folded it into that place inside herself where panic had to wait until after closing. Now Dominic Vale held the receipt between two fingers, careful not to smear the ink. He did not raise his voice. He did not ask why a waitress had memorized 5 minutes of her life so precisely. He only looked at Vivian and said, "Complaint from who?" Vivian's face softened in a way that made Maribel's stomach turn. It was the look people used when they wanted cruelty to sound like concern. "Dominic, I know this feels uncomfortable. Maribel has been emotional lately. We've tried to support her, but guest-facing roles require a certain composure." The room accepted the word composure the way rich rooms accepted everything wrapped in good manners. A woman at table 9 lowered her eyes into her wine. The bartender suddenly found the row of glasses fascinating. Vivian opened a slim black folder and laid 3 complaint forms beside the receipt. The paper was thick, expensive, ridiculous for a restaurant complaint. No signatures, only table numbers, timestamps, and phrases typed so neatly they seemed scrubbed of human breath. Guest felt crowded. Guest uncomfortable with presentation. Guest requested refined service standard. Maribel stared at the forms. "Those tables never complained to me." Vivian gave a tiny sigh. "That is often how service issues work. Guests don't always feel safe confronting staff directly." "Safe?" Maribel almost laughed, but the sound would have broken something in her. She was the one standing there with wine soaking cold through her apron, her name tag gone, every eye measuring whether her humiliation had been deserved. Dominic glanced at the forms, then at her. "You remember every table." It was not kind. It was not cruel. It was a door barely open. Maribel stepped through it. Table 6 sent back the veal because the sauce touched the potatoes. Table 8 wanted bourbon without ice, but asked for a chilled glass. Table 10 tipped cash because his wife checks the credit card statements. Table 12 asked to move away from the kitchen door before they ordered. The hostess near the podium stopped breathing. Dominic noticed. His gaze moved to her slowly. "Who seated 12? The hostess, Lila, gripped the leather menu against her ribs. "I did." Vivian turned her head just enough for Lila to see her smile. "Take your time, sweetheart." That was when Maribel saw the shift log on the hostess stand. Her name had been crossed out for front room service at 6:15, 2 hours before Vivian claimed the final complaint forced her decision. Dominic saw Maribel look. He did not follow her eyes right away. He waited, as if giving her the choice to speak or stay small. Maribel wiped her palm on the dry side of her apron and pointed to the log. "If I was still on front room tonight, why was I removed before dinner started?" Vivian's smile held, but something underneath it tightened. Dominic took out his phone, snapped one silent photo of the shift log, and slipped it back into his jacket. Then he asked Lila very softly, "Did table 12 sit at 8:41? Lila's eyes filled before her mouth answered, "No, sir." And beneath the crossed-out shift line, in Vivian's clean blue ink, Maribel saw 2 words written before the first VIP had even arrived. "Replace her." The words "replace her" were small enough to hide under a thumb, but Maribel felt them land like a hand between her shoulder blades. Lila stared at the shift log as if the ink had betrayed her first. Vivian reached for the folder with a calm so practiced it almost passed for innocence. "That note refers to staffing rotation," she said. "We move people based on guest flow, not personal feelings." Her voice was soft, professional, polished to a shine, and somehow it made the wine drying on Maribel's apron feel colder. Dominic did not answer. He took the shift log, placed it beside the complaint forms, then placed the receipt below them like pieces of a map no one wanted him to finish. 6:15, replace her. 8:41, complaint filed. 8:46, table 12 seated. 8:49, receipt printed and voided. The dining room had gone so quiet Maribel could hear the ice machine drop a fresh load behind the bar. She could hear her own breath, shallow and embarrassing. She hated that. She hated that fear had a sound. Vivian tilted her head toward her, pity arranged carefully around her mouth. "Maribel, sweetheart, this is becoming painful for you. No one is questioning your memory. But service work can feel bigger than it is when someone is under financial stress." There it was. Not fat this time. Poor. A different knife, same handle. Maribel felt the old phone heavy in her apron pocket, felt the bank alert still waiting on the cracked screen. Mercy General Pharmacy, declined. For one terrible second, she wanted to stop. Take the last check. Walk out through the service door. Find another job where people smiled at her body like it was a problem they were generous enough to tolerate. Then Dominic looked at her. Not kindly, not warmly, just directly. Is she right? He asked. Are you under financial stress? Vivian's mouth barely moved, but satisfaction flickered in her eyes. Maribel nodded once. Yes. A murmur moved through the room, small and ugly. She let it pass over her. My mother's medication is $86.17. My card declined at 8:41. That's why I remember the time. The murmur died. Vivian blinked too fast. Dominic's gaze shifted, not to Maribel's apron or her shaking hands, but to the receipt again. Show me. Maribel pulled out the old phone. The cracked screen lit her face in pale blue. Her thumb hesitated over the notification, the private shame of it, the number that proved how close she lived to the edge. Then she turned the phone outward. Dominic read it without touching her hand. Mercy General Pharmacy. 8:41 p.m. Card declined. He said nothing for so long that Vivian tried to step into the silence. Dominic, with respect, a bank notification does not explain poor guest feedback. No, he said. It explains a clock. 2 words, quiet as. A closed door. Maribel swallowed. And table 12 didn't order the wine on that receipt. Dominic's eyes moved. What wine? She pointed with one finger, careful not to smear the thermal ink. Barolo Reserva, 2011. For glasses. That table sent back the first bottle because the woman said red wine gave her migraines. She asked for sparkling water with lime. I remember because she apologized to me for being difficult. The man from table 12 shifted in his chair. His wife looked down at the untouched red smear on the tablecloth, then at Maribel's apron. Vivian's smile thinned. Guests changed their minds. Not after asking me to rinse the wine glass twice, Maribel said. Her voice was low, but it held. And not before signing a receipt with a left-handed signature when he signed the reservation card right-handed. Dominic's head turned slowly toward the host's stand. Lila opened the reservation book with trembling fingers. The card was still there, clipped beneath a brass weight. Dominic looked at the signature, then at the receipt. Same name. Wrong slant. Wrong pressure. Wrong hand. Vivian reached for her phone. Too quick, then stopped when Dominic's eyes landed on the movement. Who printed the receipt? He asked. Vivian answered before anyone else could breathe. The system did. Maribel looked at the bottom corner of the paper, at the tiny server code most people ignored because most people had never lived or died by what a receipt remembered. No, she said. The system doesn't use Vivian's override number. And there, beneath the void line, almost faded into the gray, was V.C-17. V.C-17 sat at the bottom of the receipt like a fingerprint Vivian had forgotten to wipe away. For the first time all night, she stopped smiling with her whole face. Only her mouth kept working. That is an override designation, she said, turning slightly toward the room as if the room itself were a jury she could still charm. Senior staff use them when servers make mistakes. It protects the business from confusion. Maribel felt the word mistakes settle over her shoulders. Not accusation exactly. Worse, a practiced reduction. A way of turning 6 years of memorized orders. Double shifts, burned fingers, and aching feet into one soft little failure people could nod at. A man in a navy suit near table 12 cleared his throat. Adrian Cole, Dominic's consigliere, had been sitting so still most guests had forgotten him. He rose with the quiet confidence of someone who did not need a title because everyone already knew he had won. Dominic, Adrian said, his voice smooth as poured bourbon. This can be handled privately. The young woman is clearly overwhelmed, and Vivian has followed protocol. We do not need to turn a service issue into theater. Young woman. Not Maribel. Not Miss Hayes. Just a category small enough to move aside. Vivian used the opening instantly. She took a termination form from the folder and placed it on the white tablecloth, beside the receipt, beside the reservation card, beside the name tag Maribel still held in her palm. This isn't punishment, she said gently. It's a transition. We'll offer 2-week severance, and no one has to mention tonight to future employers. The sentence was wrapped like a gift. Inside it was a threat. Sign, disappear, be grateful. The dining room breathed again. People liked paperwork. Paperwork made cruelty look clean. Maribel looked at the pen Vivian slid toward her. It was gold, heavy, engraved with the Vale House crest. She thought of her mother's pill bottle sitting empty on the kitchen counter. She thought of the bus ride home, 43 minutes if the traffic was kind, carrying a box of uniforms that no longer belonged to her. She thought of how easy it would be to sign her own silence and call it survival. Dominic said nothing. His silence did not comfort her. It pressed on everyone equally. Even the chandelier crystals seemed to hold still. Maribel reached for the pen. Vivian's shoulders relaxed by half an inch. Then Maribel moved the pen aside and placed the receipt flat in the center of the table. I won't sign something that says I made a mistake I didn't make. Her voice was not loud. That was why it cut. Adrian's expression barely changed, but he glanced toward the bar, where the POS terminal glowed blue in the dim. Dominic noticed the glance. He always noticed the thing a man did when he thought the room was looking elsewhere. Test it, Dominic said. Vivian blinked. Excuse me. The system, he said. You said it protects the business from confusion. So test it. Adrian gave a small, reasonable smile. The middle of service is not the time to audit point-of-sale operations. Dominic's eyes stayed on him. Then it's a good time to tell the truth quickly. The bar manager, a thin man named Russell, approached the POS like it was a loaded weapon. Vivian asked him to pull up table 12. He typed too fast and had to correct himself. Maribel watched his hands. She knew server hands. She knew when someone was entering a table and when someone was pretending to. Not active checks, she said. Russell froze. Vivian turned. Maribel, please don't interfere. Printer log, Maribel said, still looking at the screen. If it was voided, it'll still show there. The room shifted again, discomfort becoming something sharper. Russell tapped through menus. A thin receipt tape began to chatter from the printer. That small insect sound Maribel knew better than music. Dominic stepped closer, not to her, not away from her, just close enough that no one could reach the paper before he did. The log showed table 12 at 8:49, voided with V.C-17. Then another line printed beneath it. Same table, same wine, same risotto. Reopened at 8:52 with a second authorization. Adrian's key card number. Vivian exhaled like she had been slapped, but Adrian only smiled, calm and almost kind. I reviewed a correction, he said. That's all. He thought he had contained it. He thought the word correction was big enough to bury a waitress under. But at the bottom of the printer log, in tiny black letters, was the mistake none of them had seen yet. The reopened check had been assigned to Maribel's employee number 11 minutes after she had been crossed off the floor. The employee number printed at the bottom of the log was hers, but Maribel had never touched that check. She knew it the way a body knows a wound before the blood shows. The number sat there in black ink, neat and official, making her look guilty with the confidence only machines and powerful people could afford. Vivian looked relieved for the first time since Dominic asked for the receipt. Not happy, relieved. There, she said softly, almost sadly, as if the paper had broken her heart. That is what we were trying to avoid. Maribel has been under pressure. I didn't want this handled in front of guests. The sentence moved through the dining room like perfume overwrought. A few faces changed. Not fully, just enough. Suspicion was quieter than laughter, but it hurt more because it pretended to be fair. Maribel felt the old panic rise behind her tongue. The kind that said explain too much and they'll call you unstable, stay quiet, and they'll call you guilty. Adrian stepped closer to the table, hands folded in front of him. No one is accusing her of theft, he said, which meant everyone now was. But access logs don't appear out of nowhere. Perhaps she shared her number. Perhaps a coworker used it. These systems are only as honest as the people entering data. Dominic's face did not move. That was the frightening part. Not anger, not defense, stillness. His eyes rested on Maribel's hands, and she realized she was clutching her apron pocket so hard the cracked corner of her old phone was pressing through the fabric. She made a choice then, not a brave one, a necessary one. She pulled out the phone. The screen lit in pale blue, broken lines cutting across the glass like ice on a pond. I didn't share my number, she said. Vivian's mouth softened again. Maribel, sweetheart, be careful. Personal phones are not approved evidence. Then don't call it evidence, Maribel said. Call it why I didn't sleep. She unlocked the phone with a thumb that trembled only once. Inside was a folder named Mom, because if she named it receipts, someone might know. 26 photos opened in a grid of thermal paper, gray ink, bad lighting. Her own fingers holding corners flat beside salt shakers, coffee cups, and folded napkins. Each photo had a timestamp. Each one showed a tip changed after closeout. Each one showed a server code reassigned after the waitress had left. Dominic finally moved. One step closer. Why keep these? He asked. Not gentle. Not suspicious. Precise. Maribel swallowed. Because my mother's pharmacy calls when I'm short. Because rent doesn't care if the system made a mistake. Because every time I asked payroll, they told me women like me should be grateful for steady work. Vivian's eyes flashed. There it was, so quick most people missed it. Dominic did not. Payroll never said that, Vivian replied, voice warmer now, dangerous in its patience. What they said was that you often misunderstood deductions. Maribel tapped a photo. This deduction happened at 12:18 a.m. I clocked out at 11:03. She tapped another. This one happened during my mother's cardiology appointment. I still have the hospital bracelet in my bag. She reached under the service station, pulled out her worn tote, and removed a white paper bracelet folded around a receipt from Mercy General. The date matched the missing tip. The time matched the adjustment. The bracelet was small, ugly, and intimate in a way that made the room ashamed to look at it. Dominic stared at the hospital name longer than he should have. Something passed behind his eyes. A memory, perhaps, or a debt he had once paid too late. Adrian cleared his throat. A hospital visit proves she was away from one terminal, not every terminal. Dominic, we need to be rational. We are, Dominic said. He took Maribel's phone, but only after she nodded. He zoomed into the oldest photo. A coffee receipt lay beside the stolen tip slip, half visible under Maribel's hand. 2 black coffees, paid in cash, 12:07 a.m., from the casino lounge. Dominic's gaze sharpened, not at the stolen tip, at the handwriting on the cup label. AC Vivian must have seen it too, because she reached for the phone as if to help. Dominic turned the screen away before her fingers got close. Adrian smiled faintly. I drink coffee, Dominic. Dominic looked at him then, really looked at him, as if a familiar face had become a locked door. Not black, he said. Never after midnight. And the silence that followed was the first time Adrian Cole looked less like a trusted man and more like someone calculating the nearest exit. Adrian Cole did not move toward the exit. That was what made Dominic colder. Guilty men often ran too early. Trusted men stayed, smiled, and waited for loyalty to do the work evidence could not. The casino restaurant held its breath around him. Rain tapped against the tall front windows, soft and steady, while somewhere behind the kitchen wall the dishwasher kept cycling, metal racks clattering as if ordinary life had not just tilted on its side. Dominic handed Maribel's old phone back to her with the kind of care men like him usually reserved for weapons. Keep it on you. Maribel closed her fingers around the cracked screen. I don't want money for this. Vivian gave a small, exhausted laugh, pretending sadness. No one suggested you did. Maribel looked at her then. Really looked. I want my name off whatever you were building. I want my mother's pharmacy to stop being something you can use against me. And I want every woman you called difficult to know where her tips went. The words did not shake. That was the moment the room changed its mind about her, even if no one was brave enough to say it. Dominic turned to Russell at the POS. Ledger. Russell hesitated. Adrian spoke gently. Dominic, internal payroll records in front of guests would expose staff privacy. Let me handle this upstairs. Dominic's eyes did not leave Russell. Ledger. One word. No heat. No threat. Just gravity. Russell opened the file. Names appeared in blue rows beneath the glow of the terminal. Maribel Hayes, Denise Carter, Alma Ruiz, Keisha Bell, Nora Whitman. Women who worked double shifts. Women who carried trays through back pain. Women whose uniforms were always described as not quite flattering, not quite elevated, not quite right for the front room. Beside each name sat the same phrase: tip reallocation, service recovery, guest comfort adjustment. Dominic's jaw tightened by less than an inch. Maribel saw it because she had spent years reading men who never said what they meant. Where did it go? He asked. Russell clicked again. The screen changed. The reallocated money had not gone to managers. Not directly. It had gone to a vendor account labeled Lark Linen Services. Vivian touched the pearls at her throat. That is standard. Damaged linen, comped service, dry. Cleaning, emergency replacements. These are normal hospitality costs. Maribel stared at the name. Lark Linen. A white truck with no company phone number. A driver who never picked up laundry. A back door that opened after midnight, even when the restaurant closed at 11. She could smell it suddenly, not linen soap, but stale coffee and cigarette smoke from the alley. That truck doesn't take linen, she said. Adrian turned toward her with practiced patience. Maribel, I appreciate your desire to help, but vendors are not your department. No, she said. Trash is. Service hallway is. West door is. I know who comes in after everyone important stops looking. Silence landed hard. Dominic looked at Adrian. Pull the contract. Adrian's smile stayed in place, but it had become work. I'll have accounting send it tomorrow. Dominic's phone was already in his hand. He called one number. Elena. Remote in. Lark Linen. Contract. Invoices. Access logs. Now. Then he ended the call before the lawyer on the other end could ask questions. Vivian's perfume seemed sharper now, too sweet over the wine on Maribel's apron. The terminal blinked. A file opened. Lark Linen Services had billed Vale House for emergency cleaning every Friday night for 4 months. Each invoice matched a night when multiple tips vanished. Each invoice carried approval from Adrian Cole. Not Vivian. Adrian. Maribel did not smile. Proof did not feel like victory when it meant the room had been stealing from women too tired to fight. There's no linen pickup on Fridays, she said. Only deliveries. Dominic's eyes moved to the access log. West service door. 12:04 a.m. key card entry. A. Cole. Every Friday. For months. Adrian's voice came quieter now. I oversee operations. That is not unusual. Dominic stared at the screen a long time. Long enough for the rain to become loud again. Long enough for Maribel to understand that betrayal did not always arrive with a gun. Sometimes it wore a tailored suit, stood at your right hand for years, and told you which people were too small to notice. Dominic finally looked at the man he had trusted more than family and said, I gave you that door. I gave you that door, Dominic said, and the sentence stayed in the room longer than a shout would have. Adrian's expression did not break. He only lowered his eyes, as if disappointed by the accusation rather than afraid of it. You gave me responsibility, he said. I used it. Vivian stood beside him with her hands folded, elegant and careful, while the rain kept tapping the windows like fingers asking to be let in. Dominic turned away first. That was the trap. Men like Adrian expected anger. They expected pride. They expected Dominic to demand a confession loud enough for everyone to deny later. Instead, Dominic looked at Russell and said, Reopen table 12. Russell's fingers froze over the POS screen. Sir. Same items. Same correction. Same void. Do exactly what the log says happened. Vivian's lips parted. Dominic, that would contaminate the record. Maribel heard it immediately. Not ruin. Not confuse. Contaminate. A word for evidence. Dominic heard it too, but he gave her nothing. No nod. No glance. Only silence. Russell began entering the items with the slow terror of a man walking across thin ice. Barolo Reserva, 2011. For glasses. Truffle risotto. Service recovery adjustment. The printer clicked once, then chattered. A fresh receipt curled out, warm and white and accusing. Dominic did not take it. Maribel. Her name and his voice made the room look at her differently. Not kindly yet, but differently. She stepped forward with her torn apron still damp against her thighs and her old phone clutched in one hand. What's wrong? He asked. Not what happened. Not explain yourself. What's wrong? She looked at the new receipt, then the old one. Her eyes moved over the table number, the server code, the wine, the risotto, the timestamp. For a second, she felt every person in the room waiting for her to fail, waiting for the big waitress to prove she had only been lucky once. Then she saw it. The printer station, she said. Vivian gave a soft laugh. Now we're blaming printers? Maribel did not look at her. This one printed at the bar. The first one didn't. Dominic's gaze sharpened by a fraction. Adrian finally shifted his weight. Receipts print wherever the system routes them. No, Maribel said. Not table 12. Table 12 prints at the West Service Station because it's assigned to private dining overflow. That's why the paper edge is different. She held up the old receipt. Its left side had a faint serrated tear. The West printer blade has been dull for months. I asked for a replacement twice. The room went still again, But this silence had teeth. Dominic looked at Russell. Camera on West Station. Russell swallowed. There's a gap in that feed. Live feed. Dominic's voice dropped 1 degree. Now. The monitor above the bar switched to the West Service hallway. Narrow, bright, empty except for stacked linen bins and a black camera dome with one red light blinking in the corner. Dominic placed the old receipt on the table and the new one beside it. Adrian, he said mildly, print the correction from the West Station. Adrian smiled as if the request amused him. I don't work terminals. Maribel looked at his right hand. The same hand that always held his coffee cup with the sleeve turned inward. The same hand now resting too close to his jacket pocket. He has the manager card, she said. He taps it with his knuckle, not his thumb. I've seen him do it after midnight. Adrian's smile thinned. Vivian turned her head too quickly toward him. Dominic saw both. On the monitor, the west hallway remained empty. Then Adrian's phone vibrated on the table. No one touched it. The screen lit up with a message preview from an unknown number. Is she still holding the old receipt? For the first time, Adrian looked at Maribel not like an employee, not like a problem, but like a witness who had survived longer than he planned. Dominic stepped beside her then, not in front of her, and Adrian understood all at once that the room had changed sides. The message on Adrian's phone stayed lit for 3 seconds, then went dark, but 3 seconds was enough to change the weight of the room. Is she still holding the old receipt? No one spoke. Even the slot machines beyond the frosted glass seemed far away now, their bright little songs trapped in another world where people still believed money was the loudest thing in a casino. Dominic looked at the phone, then at Adrian, and something human moved across his face, so briefly Maribel almost missed it. Not rage. Pain. The quiet kind that arrives when a man realizes betrayal did not break into his house. He handed it a key. Adrian reached for the phone. Dominic's hand closed over his wrist before anyone saw him move. Not hard. Not dramatic. Just enough. Don't. Vivian inhaled sharply. Adrian smiled with his mouth only. Private messages, Dominic. Then you shouldn't have brought them into my room. Dominic released him and nodded once toward Russell. Main screen. The large black display above the private dining arch flickered awake, the same screen usually used for wine pairings and charity donor names. Now it showed the West Service hallway, then the POS log, then the key card entries Elena had pulled from upstairs. Each item appeared cleanly, coldly, without mercy. 8:32 p.m., Adrian Cole, accounting office. 8:41 p.m., complaint form created. 8:49 p.m., table 12 voided, Vivian Cross override. 8:52 p.m., correction approved, Adrian Cole manager card. 8:53 to 9:04 p.m., camera feed unavailable. 9:07 p.m., service locker corridor, secondary camera active. Vivian whispered, there is no secondary camera. Maribel turned slowly. There is. Her voice was quiet, but everyone heard it. The old one above the coat closet. It points at the ice machine reflection. Nobody uses it because the angle is bad. Dominic looked at her then, and for the first time tonight, he looked ashamed. Not of her, of himself. Because the camera had always been there. Because she had known his building better than the men paid to protect it. Because he had spent years watching threats come through front doors while women like Maribel learned the truth from reflections in dented steel. Russell pulled the backup. The image was grainy, almost useless until it was not. In the curved side of the ice machine, distorted but clear enough, Vivian appeared with Maribel's locker open. Adrian stood behind her, holding a white envelope. Vivian placed it inside. Adrian leaned close and said something the camera did not catch. Then the audio file from the recorder began to play from Maribel's old phone, because she had backed it up automatically to the cracked little device everyone treated like trash. Adrian's voice filled the restaurant, smooth and bored. Fire the big one tonight. Make it about her size. Nobody will look past that. A sound left Dominic's chest, not a word, not even a breath. Just the collapse of a belief. Maribel kept her eyes on the receipt because if she looked at him, she might forgive too quickly what had taken years to harm her. Vivian finally lost the softness in her face. You don't understand what this room requires, she said, and now the knife had no velvet left. People pay to feel elevated. They don't want reminders of struggle carrying their wine. Maribel lifted the old receipt, The one with the dull torn edge and the faded V.C-17. Her hand did not shake anymore. No, she said. They paid for dinner. You charged them for cruelty and called it elegance. Nobody moved. The VIP couple at table 12 stared at their plates. Lila covered her mouth. Russell began to cry silently behind the bar. Dominic took the receipt from Maribel only after she let it go. He placed it beside Adrian's phone, Vivian's complaint forms, the keycard log, and the frozen frame of the envelope in the locker. For small things. Enough to bury powerful people. Adrian's face had gone pale now. Dominic, he said carefully, think about your license. Think about the casino. Think about what public exposure does to us. Dominic looked at the man he had trusted, then at the waitress he had nearly let them erase. When he spoke, his voice was so calm it emptied the room. Call my attorney. Call my attorney, Dominic said, and the words did not explode. They landed. Elena answered on speaker before the second ring, and Dominic gave her everything in a voice, so even it made Vivian look smaller with every syllable. The vendor account, the key card logs, the forged complaints, the locker footage, the recording, the stolen tips. Adrian tried once to speak. Dominic did not look at him. Not another word in my house. That was all. Two security men stepped forward, not rough, not theatrical, just final. Adrian Cole left through the front dining room, past the same tables where he had tried to bury Maribel beneath a lie about her body. Vivian followed 10 minutes later with her pearls still on and her access badge cut in half on the hostess stand. No one clapped. That would have been too easy. The silence did something better. It made them walk through the truth. The next morning, Vale House did not open for brunch. Every server, cook, bartender, busboy, hostess, dishwasher, and cleaner was called into the main dining room. The chandeliers were on, but the room felt different in daylight. Less golden, more honest. Dominic stood at the head of table 12 with Elena beside him and a stack of corrected payroll records in front of her. Your tips were stolen, he said. No speech. No apology disguised as policy. That happened under my name. That is on me. Maribel stood near the service station in a clean black dress because her apron had been taken as evidence, and for once no one looked at her like her body was a problem the room had to solve. Denise Carter cried when Elena handed her a check for 4 months of missing tips plus penalties. Alma Ruiz pressed the paper to her mouth. Keisha Bell whispered, I knew I wasn't crazy, and that broke something open in half the staff. Dominic waited until every name had been called. Then he picked up Maribel's name tag from the table. The metal had been cleaned, but one corner still had a faint scratch where Vivian's nail had dragged across it. He did not pin it on her. He held it out in his palm. This belongs to you, he said. Only if you want it back. Maribel looked at the tag for a long time. 6 years of being useful. 6 years of swallowing small insults because rent was due and medicine was due and pride did not lower hospital bills. Then she took it. Not as a waitress, she said. Dominic did not blink. Name the position. She looked at the staff, at the women who had learned to laugh softly when hurt because loud pain got written up. Staff advocate. Tip audit access. Shift logs locked after posting. Camera backups outside hospitality control. And no more front room body standards hidden inside words like refinement. Elena's pen was already moving. Dominic nodded once. Done. Mercy General received payment that afternoon, but Maribel learned about it from the hospital billing office, not from Dominic. Her mother's medication was delivered before dinner in a brown paper pharmacy bag with no note, no performance, no debt attached. That mattered more than flowers. A week later, the first receipt was sealed in glass and placed in Maribel's new office, not in the lobby, not where Dominic could turn it into his own legend. Under it, on a small brass plate, were the words she chose herself. The truth was printed before anyone was ready to read it. On Friday night, the receipt printer began chattering again during service. Maribel paused at the sound. For months, it had sounded like money disappearing, like proof being buried, like her name being erased one line at a time. Now a young hostess brought her a hot coffee and set it beside her old cracked phone, the same phone that had saved every photo no one wanted to believe. Maribel touched the warm cup, then the name tag pinned straight over her heart. Maribel Hayes, staff advocate. Dominic stood in the doorway, quiet as ever. She looked up and said, You asked for the receipt. Next time, ask sooner. Dominic lowered his eyes, and in that small silence, the most powerful man in the room finally understood that justice was not the moment he spoke, but the moment he learned to listen.